This is the White Wolf Blogcast.
So let's start. This is Your Game Sucks. This is a presentation actually I've done a few years now. I started doing this at the International Camera Convention a few years back, and I did it again at Grand Masquerade last year. And over time, I found that there's a lot more utility than just a cam-centric presentation. So this year, I updated it, took out some of the Cam Fan Club specific references, and I thought I'd present that to a larger community, may find useful for other large-scale games. And this is the 2.1 version because I've actually added one whole new slide. So, totally unique material. It's worth your time. The first question, however, was why bother with talking about large-scale games and why people play the way they do? And there's a few reasons. One of them is that there actually hasn't been any serious evaluations of what a large-scale LARP game is about, why they work the way they do. There's been evaluations of other kinds of games, but live-action games specifically there hasn't been a lot of examination of, and I think that large-scale games can learn a lot from what live-action games have figured out over the past 20 years. So there's certainly a lot of utility to be found in both directions, also because playstyles aren't unique. And live-action games can learn from other forms of interactive entertainment like tabletop games and MMOs. So there's certainly a lot to learn both ways. But before I go into this, I do need to give a few disclaimers about what I'm going to talk about. The first step, these are my personal theories. It doesn't mean they're automatically right just because I have a cool title or because I get dental from CCP. All it means is that I've thought about this because I'm a huge nerd. My experience is biased towards large-scale live-action games. I've been playing them for a disturbingly long time, more than some people have been alive. And as a result, therefore, that's where most of my experience comes from. But really, I do this because it's a chance to think critically about your opinions towards these large-scale games. Even if you don't change your opinions, it's a chance to think about why you play the way you do and why others play the way you do, and you can make some decisions or just reinforce why you do what you do. Really, the goal of all of this is to get the most people having the most fun in these kinds of large-scale games. And that's ultimately what this is all about. We're all here to have fun. This is a way to help facilitate that, not to tell people that they're wrong. So one of the first things I'll start off with is to look at previous playstyle models. These are studies that people have done in the past of these kinds of things. One of the things about playstyles that is important is that this is an analytical tool. This isn't a gamer personality test. This is a way to shoehorn someone into a particular style of play. Rather, this is a way to analyze what's going on in your games and react accordingly. As a result, players usually will fall into multiple categories, not only simultaneously, but also over the course of a person's career or a person's chronicle, or even just an individual game. And so really it's a look at trends rather than putting people into a box and making sure that those individual boxes and groups fight to find out who's the best gameplay. That's why I title this Your Game Sucks, because that's usually the reaction everyone has when they have these kinds of conflicts, and I think that we can get past that into something that's much more meaningful and much more useful. So we have a bunch of academic stuff I'm going to go through. I'm going to try to make it as fast as possible. But the thing that's worth noting is that there's actually been a lot of study in the past 10 years, over the past 10 years, for playstyles and how players interact with each other in these kinds of games. So I'm going to look at 4 of them that I think are most useful and sometimes the most cited. And that covers tabletop, online games, and LARP. The first one is a D&D survey. It was done by Wizards of the Coast in 1999. This was right when Wizards of the Coast acquired the D&D property, and they started looking into what actually works for them. This is actually put together by Ryan Dancy. And they found 4 different styles of play as a result of that. There was the Thinker. The Thinker are players that enjoy min-maxing and like solving puzzles in the course of their game. There's the Power Gamer, who enjoys intense gaming experiences, and they don't really care about the storyline implications of their actions as a result. There's the Character Actor, who really enjoys fully expressing their character, but they actually make suboptimal tactical choices or character choices in order to have the correct motivations for that character. And then the Storyteller, the person who finds enjoyment in the progression of the narrative. They look for, whenever there's an inconsistency in the story, they look for an answer outside of the rules, inside of the game world, in order to explain those inconsistencies. Another model that was very popular in the independent scene is called the Big Model. And this is put together by Ron Edwards. And the idea of this is it details 3 different creative agendas that he calls that relate to what they call the elements of exploration, which I've abbreviated EOE. And elements of exploration are specifically a character, setting, the color of the game, what the flavor of the game is like, the situations of the game, as well as the mechanical system. And the big model has 3 different distinctions. There's simulationism, which is the idea that the elements of exploration are things unto themselves. You explore character because that is what you do in the game. Actually, Vampire is a very good example of this. Is a lot of the game is about the exploration of character and humanity, and so therefore it's very much a simulation game from that perspective. There's gamism, and where the elements of exploration actually has an arena for proving the abilities of the players. So when you get into a conflict with the system, that's a way for the players to show their superior as a player. There's actually more winning and losing in gamist-style games. And finally, there's narrativism, in which the elements of exploration to create a story that address a premise. So you're not actually exploring the elements of exploration themselves, but they are tools in which you put together a larger story. And you can jump into or out of those elements of exploration as long as a continual narrative is evolving. As I mentioned before, these are commonly referred to in the independent RPG scene. Initially, they were kind of the darling of the indie RPG scene. Now there's a lot of fictitious conflict as to whether GNS theory, the other name for it, is actually relevant or not. But certainly, if you get involved in the more independent RPG scene, you can't go too far in theory without some comment about Big Model. Third is the Bartle test. This is put together by Dr. Richard Bartle. He put this together in 1996 as a study of MUD players. He since evolved this into a few different Bartle tests, and those get really, really complicated and intricate. And I actually ran into him at GDC Online at a party, and I asked him, why do you have so many tests? And he's like, I just kept changing my mind. So he also is evolving theories on this, but there's one that the initial test he put together is one that a lot of people refer to when they talk about their own theories, so I'm going to use that as the only example here. He found multiple MUD players as well, which are achievers, those that really want to raise in level. They want to increase in level, they level up, and that's their goal. Explorers, he calls it in delight in exposing their internal mechanisms. Really, it's they like to figure out how the game works and either to appreciate that, make that more efficient, or simply to just go, hey, I now know how this thing works, and you enjoy that. Socializers, people who actually don't care as much about the game, the multi-user dungeon, as it were, but are more interested in just talking to people and seeing what they have to say. Then there are the killers, the people who get off on actually imposing themselves on others. And while the most common form of this is like actually just killing other people's characters, there's certainly also a amount of busybodying or telling people how to play their character, the best way to play the game, that comes out in this. And in MMOs, this comes up in calling people noobs for not having the most optimal build in, like, say, World of Warcraft. That's also a killer playstyle from Bartle's perspective. And as I mentioned, there have been expansions and reputations. One of the best reputations I found is Nick Yee. But a lot of the MUD's initial understanding seems to extend pretty well to MMO sphere, although there's some distinctions and breakdowns that really get increasingly academic, so I actually pulled the Nick Yee slide from this just to note that the MUD exploration has been adopted at some level to some of the MMO theory as well. And finally, the venue style sheets. These are something that have been around in the Camarilla, now known as the Mind's Eye Society, for a number of years. And this was a template they used to try to help define gameplay styles so that outside players coming into a new game can understand what kind of game they can expect. And this isn't as much an analytical tool as a way to kind of express in shorthand what the game is about. So it's the only thing I can find in the LARP section, but I think it's useful to see how people are thinking about their own games and how they're choosing to express it to other people. But these venue style sheets broke down into 8 different categories. Action, covering combat and challenges. Character development, which involves personal dilemma and choices. Darkness, which involves player character death as well as the corruption of player characters. Drama, involving ceremony and grand story epic elements. Intrigue, so lots of politics, negotiation, and diplomacy. Manners, social etiquettes, peer pressure, and the game of manners or courtly intrigue. Mystery, enigmas, and investigation. And pace, how fast the stories actually evolved and moved through it during the course of a session. So as a result of that, I looked at all these different play styles, and I found that in live action games, there seems to be 4 distinct play styles that emerge. And more as I've done this talk over several years, I'm finding these playstyles actually do fairly adapt to to large-scale games in which players have some amount of agency, some amount of control over how the story evolves. So this applies to large-scale chat groups as well. I've been talking to Ian Watson about the chat community. I think there's a lot of overlap in how chats conduct themselves. So these playstyles, I think, are actually applicable to other games as well. But before I go into them, I do want to specify that we're finding these playstyles really work for large-scale games, so more than a handful of people, in which the players have some ability to dictate how their game emerges. So that they can run challenges on their own, or they can have scenes off the side. There's no arbitrator necessary presence, and there's no programming that can stop them necessarily from what kind of actions they can take. So the first playstyle is the actor playstyle. And this is where the actors use the game as a method in order for portraying a particular character. They have a character in mind they want to portray, and they very much want to get that character across. To them, the most important aspect of playing in these games is character-driven roleplay. One of the downsides is that because they're so into portraying the character, that an out-of-game interaction they may find to be disruptive and actually hurting the game that they're playing as a result. And also, they can also become very, very attached to the personal story they have and care less about the needs of the other players during the course of the game. This ties in pretty well to the big model simulationism in regards to character specifically, as well as the D&D character actor. Next, there are cultivators. These are people who view the game as a method of improving their character and then demonstrating how that character has improved, usually over other player characters. To them, mechanical development, the exploration of mechanics is the most important to these kinds of players. They do tend to rely on those mechanical interactions. The most obvious one is combat, but also these are people that will much rather use their social dots in order to resolve a situation rather than role-playing it out. And they may also find that non-mechanical situations are quote-unquote unfair. So if someone can simply as a better role player or as a more forceful personality, they may find it unfair that that person gets further along than someone who has a more efficient character sheet. This ties in well to the big model gamism, as well as the D&D power gamer templates. Next are fixers. Fixers are people who really play the game in the way to solve problems, as well as finding problems that they can solve. They find that engaging in these challenges, both generated by the storyteller and by other players, to be the most important aspect of playing these games. And they also think that stories that don't have these challenges can be a bit boring, and may go so far as creating challenges for themselves or for others in order to make the game more interesting from their perspective. And they can be simultaneously frustrated if those challenges are too powerful. So there is actually a sweet spot in the fixer's mind where the challenges to be just interesting enough to engage them, but not so complex that they can't actually resolve it or make any headway on it. This ties pretty well to the D&D model of thinker, as well as Bartle's idea of the explorer, as I mentioned, the exploration of the underpinnings of the game. That can also tie to the underpinnings of the mysteries of the world. And finally, there are the socialites. These are people who really play the game as a method for being social and making friends and personal relationships. They really believe that costuming and socialization, both in character and out of character, are the most important aspects of these kinds of games. And actually can fall out of game if they find an out-of-character conversation is much more interesting than what's going on inside the game. They may also tweak their characters or make a whole new one if they find that they're not getting the interactions they need, or they're not meeting the people they want to, or if they just get a new piece of costuming they think is really cool and want to try out. I really think that the socialite style is unique to large-scale games. The socializer that Bartle mentions is probably the closest, but when you get to having an actual community that evolves during the course of these games, you have a player type that wants to take advantage of that community on both an in-game and out-of-game levels. So this is a fairly unique play style to this style of large-scale games. There is a special case, however. Asshole is not a play style, believe it or not. Any of these play styles can be used to justify assholes being assholes. It's not just cultivators. It's not just people who want to beat your character up. A socialite can be just as much of an asshole as anybody else. They can certainly say, well, you're not, that dress is terrible, or your character wouldn't wear that. Anyone can use these kinds of things to be an asshole. It is somewhat similar to the idea of griefers in MMOs or to internet trolls. But I've chosen the word asshole for two reasons. One is the fact that there's a little bit of a disconnect because you're actually inside of the world of the game, and so a troll is very much outside of it trying to get a reaction, and this is not quite the same thing. And a griefer is just as likely to try to push against the rules of the system as well as other players. And the second reason is that it's nice to kind of pretty up language. The reality is people are assholes, call them what they are, and identify them as such. harsh language sometimes needs to identify harsh, ugly situations. Plus, it's a cool picture. So that's a lot of theory stuff, and theory is fun to talk about, but I've always firmly believed that theory is only as useful as how it actually applies to your games. So I want to get to application, and really it's important to what the hell all of this studies and words and pictures of donkeys and wells actually means to my game. So the first thing you need to do if you want to actually apply some of this playstyle exploration into your games is to determine what you actually like. And one way to do that is to write down an honest list of the things that you really like and dislike about your game. And in this case, your game not only means the game you're playing in, but also the game you bring. So the game that you like, what you like to do in games is just as much your game as the group of people that you play that game with. This really shouldn't be a list of judgments. You want to think about your ideal game and how it'll be fun for you. If you really enjoy beating people up, look into that and think about that. If you enjoy that thrill of being in a huge combat and your character coming out ahead against all odds, that's okay. Be honest about that examination. That doesn't mean you're a poor player because you like to be a cultivator. These aren't meant to be judgmental. These are meant to be analytical. And also see which of the playstyles you're inclined towards, not the one you think you should be inclined towards. And that's something that has come up time and again, not only during this talk, but also just in my past 20 years of playing these games, is there becomes an aggregate playstyle that everyone kind of subconsciously has accepted as okay, and other playstyles are accepted as not okay. And so you feel like I should be an actor because being a cultivator is bad. And that's not true. It's simply not true. It's objectively not true. These are playstyles and ways to engage these games that are acceptable and are backed up by science. They're backed up by data. So don't stop thinking that your playstyle that you like to play is bad. It may be not suitable for the people you play with. That does not mean your playstyle is wrong. So once you figured out what you like to play and what your playstyle is, then you move on to what other people like. And so one thing you do is think about what kinds of scenes that tend to happen around you when you're playing the games. If you're playing in a game and you find that combat seems to erupt just about every game session, maybe a lot of the players around you really enjoy playing cultivators. If you go to a game and everyone spends 4 hours talking and nothing else seems to happen, maybe you have a lot of socialites as your playstyle. So something you need to look at is how that's just happening in the game and how that ties to those playstyles. Storytellers or people running the games can poll players and hold an open conversation about what players like and dislike. And that's, I think, an important point is having a conversation, talking about this is what we enjoy, this is not what we enjoy. That's fantastically useful information for a storyteller, but you have to go actually get that information in order to make use of it. And again, you need to look at what's there, not what you want to be there. If you really want to run a game of courtly intrigue and your players really want to use those character sheets to get the maximum benefit, you have to look at what the players actually want and not what you would ideally like to have the game to be. You really need to examine what players are enjoying and see what you can do about that enjoyment. So once you have an idea of what kind of game you want to play and you have an idea of what kind of game other players want to play, you have to figure out where the areas of conflict are occurring. And this is pretty obvious in games that are having trouble, but even games that are going smoothly should still look into these areas of conflict. Different play styles pretty obviously can involve different styles of conflict, but it more often happens if not everyone's aware of what kinds of games everyone's playing. So the more you know what's going on, it's easier to avoid these conflicts, but the more that sub rosa, you're going to have these conflicts in a way that people can't quite articulate, and that's the big distinction, is that if you can't articulate why you're not having fun, just, this game sucks, your game sucks, I don't like it, that doesn't help anybody. All that adds you have one pissed off player and one less person you can have fun with. So the idea is to identify why aren't you having fun, using these tools to figure out what ways you can fix that, and finding a resolution. And again, I'm going to repeat this multiple times, but I think it's extremely important in order to make this system work, is that you can't have a playstyle choice that is objectively wrong. Imposing your playstyle choice on somebody else is what's wrong. So after you figure that out, you see how you can help everybody get what they want. And one thing you do is to find ways to help other players get what they want with little to no sacrifice to what you want. There's a lot of times where just a very simple nudge or even simply not doing something will make things fun for everybody else. And that's obviously the optimal way you want to resolve this. I do a little thing, you get much enjoyment out of it, everyone's happy. If that's not possible, then one thing you can do is what I call trading sacrifice. If you give up a little bit of something of what you consider fun, and that player has fun, then they're more likely down the road to give up a little something they like fun to help you. There's actually been pretty intensive studies on gift giving, which has recently been studied a lot in video game theory. in terms of how microtransactions work and how gift giving on like Facebook games and whatnot work. And so studies of how gifts work has been very important to that. And one of the things found in gift giving is that when you're expected to give a gift, like at a Christmas or a holiday, people feel obligated to return a gift, and there's less emotional attachment to both the act of giving and the act of receiving. However, if the gift is given without any prompting, if you just say, hey, you know, I thought of you and I got you this, that person starts a cognitive loop in which they feel they have to complete that loop only by returning the favor. And statistically, it is found that the returned favor is proportionately more expensive or more valuable than the received gift. So what this all means is if you do a little favor, if you give up a little bit of your fun now, unprompted, you're more likely to get that fun back in spades later from those players. So this is a real thing. This is real stuff. But again, that sets a lot of theoretical stuff. So how do we make this into examples? So I have two different examples here. The first one is how to do a small sacrifice. And the example is that there's a cultivator and an actor, someone who likes optimization, someone who likes to portray their character, and they're in a combat scene. This has been in every LARP, in every game that will ever be in existence. And so naturally the cultivator wants to win the fight. He wants to show that his mathematical precision of his sheet is superior to everybody else's. That's what he enjoys. The actor wants his character to be notorious. He wants his people to talk about his character and to talk to him. Whether he wins or not, he doesn't really care about. He wants people to talk about him. It's very much like Oscar Wilde. It's not what you're being talked to. It's not the fact you're talking good or bad about you, rather people are talking about you. So they compare their sheets, and they pretty readily agree that, naturally, the cultivator's PC is a superior character sheet. So they decide to just talk through the fight and allow that the actor's PC gets away with a disfiguring scar. Something that shows that he's a badass. He still loses. He still clearly has lost the fight. But now he has something new on his character that he can talk about and people can talk about. What happened to that fight? Where'd you get that scar from? The actor gets the attention he wants. The cultivator gets that rush of winning that combat. Both sides wins, and both sides have given up very, very little. On the other hand, a trading sacrifice, actually giving up a little bit now for something later, can pay off. And here's an example of how that might work. Slightly more obscure situation. A fixer and a socialite are a situation. The fixer wants to find problems and solve them. The socialite wants to talk to people. An NPC walks in order to cause problems in the situation. The storyteller asks the players, what do you want from this NPC? Ideally, this probably happens beforehand, but maybe in the course of the game, people are not engaging. The storyteller's like, hey, so what do you guys want out of this scene? And so the fixer finds out that he really wants to fix whatever the problem this NPC brings in. This guy's coming into town, something's going to happen, I want to know what's happening so I can go fix it, or be the guy who knows that there's a problem. Socialite really just wants to have a cool scene, talking to this NPC and getting to really be involved and have some awesome roleplay as a result. So the NPC talks to Socialite while the fixer overhears the conversation. So the fixer's giving up the chance to talk to this NPC directly and get the scoop directly. The socialite's giving up the chance to be the person to go after this problem. The fixer goes off and starts to look into the problem while the socialite continues talking to the NPC. But what happened is that the core of what each person wants, they get. That socialite knows that down the road, the fixer player is probably going to hook them up with another cool scene. The fixer knows that if I hang out with the socialite, I can find out more problems and be able to solve more problems. This is what I sometimes refer to as the Nosferatu Toreador symbiosis, because the Toreador goes off and talks to cool people while Nosferatu overhear and then go off and do something about it. This is a way that you can trade that sacrifice. The Toreador goes a little more talky, the Nosferatu is a little more stealthy, and both sides get what they want. So this is the bonus slide by the Icelandic supermarket store Bonas, or however it's pronounced, because Iceland is stupid. But getting and using feedback, how do you actually get this information and then use it? And one thing I found over the course of the years, shorts and anonymous information is the best way to get it. If you have someone filling out a 5-page form in which they give their blood type and what player type they are and who are the last 5 people they played with and what was the number of stats in their sheet at the time, they're not going to fill it out, they don't care. Making it very, very short, kind of, what did you like? What didn't you like? What can we change? Those 3 questions will get you a lot of information. Further, especially in games that are emotional, such as World of Darkness games, there's a lot of difficulty in separating personal emotional investments and the investments of characters. So anonymous feedback really helps that people feel like they can be objectively critical without it coming back on them in some way. So making short anonymous information really helps to get you the most accurate information and the most likely amount of return information. Another part is don't sit around and wait for people to give you information. You gotta go get it. If you just say, If you guys want to tell me what was good with the game afterwards, I'll be around. No one's going to come talk to you. Every storyteller, I see a bunch of people nodding their heads because you know exactly how this works. But if you say, hey guys, I'll give you an experience point if you give me information, everybody has a real strong opinion all of a sudden as to what they want to do. So you have to go get it, whether that's through rewards like an experience point or actually grabbing people after the game. It's like, hey, let's go have a drink and sit down and talk. It's like going, so what'd you like? What didn't you like? Did you have fun? Pulling people off one-to-one sometimes help. That does break down the anonymous element of it, but in my personal opinion, I'd be willing to trade anonymous for data. It's like, if people are just absolutely terrified to give you information, that's fine, but going out and getting it's probably going to get you better results than absolutely assuring they can do it anonymously. And if in order to get this information, even player to player, going back from storyteller information, but just as a player, if you want to talk to another player about their play style, you really need to go into that conversation. You want to be productive and not judgmental. If you say, I don't understand why you killed my character, that's going to get you a different conversation than, you fucker, you killed my character. And it's going to be hard, because I have certainly been on that moment where I've had a character I've loved get killed, and I've had that emotional reaction to that player who did it. So I get it. I'm with you guys. I know how hard it can be, but every time I've been in that situation, I took a breath. It's like, I want to understand, my character's dead. I can't do anything about it. Can you tell me kind of what happens? And more often than not, such a cool story comes from it that I'm blown away. Brief example, I was playing a character I played for 2.5 years in the Camp Fan Club, Satisfied Invictus character. I went to ICC, I had big plans, I was going there, storyteller pulled me into a side room, you get summoned, oh cool, awesome, go over here, dead. And I'm just like, what? I didn't even see the guy who killed me? I started asking out of character values, I was curious, and apparently this is like a year-long assassination attempt that people have been doing against my character. There were email lists and meetings and agenda all about killing me. So, if that's not awesome, I don't know what is. So, I wouldn't have got that if I'd gone in saying, you fuckers, you killed my character. I went in saying, I want to know what's going on. I want to hear the awesome story behind this, and I got it. So, if you want to get this information, go in assuming that there's an awesome reason, not a terrible reason. You'll get a lot better results. And then when you're doing this conversation, try to always get to an action plan. Don't develop in theory wank. As I mentioned a few times here, is like going, well, it seems like you're a cultivator and I'm an actor, so we should look into analysis, blah, 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 blah. I just say, okay, you really like showing how physically superior you are. I really like talking to people. Why don't we see if we can work something up so maybe you could be my bodyguard? And so that way I can get into fights with people and you can take them out for me. Does that work for you? We have an action plan. We have something we can work on and go. So definitely use these tools, definitely talk about these tools, but always in the back of your head, by the end of the conversation, try to get to what can we do now, what can we do next game, what can we do in 3 months from now. Get to those action plans. You'll have a much, much better result every time. And finally, one size doesn't fit all with all of this. You have to take these and apply them in what makes sense for your chronicle, your medium, whether it's live action, whether it's chat, whether it's a tabletop game. It's really, really large scale, interconnected. You have to apply these as appropriate. These are general trends. These are not cookie cutter player classes. You don't walk up to someone and say, hey, you're an actor, so you can do blah, 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 and that's it. And that person's not going to do blah, 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 because maybe right now they're feeling like a cultivator because they had a bad day at work and they really just want to beat the shit out of something. Sometimes you have those days. So you can't just go in and say, well, you have to act this way because Eddie Slide said so. Not going to work for you, I'm telling you. Also, players change over time. When I first started playing Vampire, I was absolutely a cultivator. I was really all about playing the Brujah with 14 physical traits, and I had all the potence and all the celerity and burning wrath and everything I could to make sure that motherfucker went down. That's what I loved. That's what I enjoyed. And then over the years, the number that I don't want to repeat again, but after the years, I found that I enjoyed acting for a while and playing that. And now I'm more of a socialite. I'm really about just chatting with people and having the cool conversations, and I don't pull out the character sheet as much. That doesn't make me a good or a bad player. I've gotten older. I've changed a bit. I've got a few more gray hairs. This is why I like to have fun now. And that means next week I may want to go back and beat up a motherfucker with burning wrath and 14 physical traits, and that's okay too. But people do change, and so you really need to constantly reassess both yourself and what the other players are doing. You can't just do it once and say, cool, we're done. This chronicle is locked in. Every few months, Are you guys still having fun? Do you want me to change something? You guys got a lot of intrigue going on now. Do you want to scale back from that a bit? Has it been too much? Do you want to go back and maybe do some more challenges? Constantly have that reassessment, constantly have that conversation, because people are going to change. And also never assume you know what another player wants, because one, you don't know another person's mind, and two, because of how games work, that player probably themselves doesn't entirely know what they want out of that scene. One of the biggest problems with game theory has been, what is fun? We don't know the answer to that question because there isn't a right answer to that question. So when people who make these games for a living can't answer that question, a guy who comes up and plays the game sure is not going to know what he thinks is fun. So you can never assume that you know what they think is fun. So you always, whenever there's doubt, move to a conversation where you can find out what is actually fun right now, what's going to work best.
The White Wolf Modcast is released under the Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivative 3.0 license. Music and sounds provided by Kevin MacLeod in the Free Sound Project. All opinions expressed in this broadcast are solely those of the hosts and guests, and do not necessarily reflect those of White Wolf Publishing.